Welcome everyone in room and online to the MAS March 2023 General Meeting. I am your president, Trina Johnson. In case you don't know who I am yet, I am me. And I have up on the screen highlighted a up-and-coming astrophotographer by the name of Jessie Palmer. And she has taken a picture of the Helix Nebula. So yay, Jessie! And later on in the presentation, you will also see another photo from her that I stole from the same Slack channel. You'll see it. But let's find out who else is on the board. We have John. We have Dave Falkner, who's walked over there. We have Matt. We have, hopefully, and we have Ahmed in the house. So these are your board members for 2023, at least. But we would like to also welcome the new members that have signed up since beginning of February. So welcome everyone. I don't know if anybody's in the house that's new on the list or if anybody that is signed on in person, online. Welcome. I'm sorry? I thought I heard somebody. But we do have 18 new members, so very much welcome. We're excited to have you here, which brings our total to 684 new members. With that, I would also like to thank all of the volunteers for the MAS, whether it's in outreach, in committees, in star parties, tech support, anything that you can think of that the MAS does or doesn't do, we probably do. And we do need you. And we need your talents. Haha, Ahmed. And one of the talents that we're going to be looking for this summer as we get into training season is someone that can maybe help us with videotaping our training videos for each of some of the different sites. We're going to start small and work to the bigger ones. We'll see how it goes. So if you have that talent, or maybe you want to explore that talent, we would like to talk to you. So if you could send an email to the secretary or the president with some, hey, I want to volunteer, we would love to include you in this. So thank you very much. And I know we talk about Slack at every meeting, but it's a useful tool. I use it at work. We send really good, quick, easy messages back and forth to everybody in our group and within our company. And I can send to one person or I can send it to multiple people. It's really easy to tag them in and get our communications going a little bit quicker, sometimes quicker than chat, definitely quicker than email. So, but we also have, as part of the MAS, our Slack channels, which have different subcategories, per se, where like with Jessie's pictures, she posted them on the astrophotography channel and allowed me to put them into our presentation. So it's really good for some quick feedback if you're looking for that or just kind of interested. And you can use it on mobile or you can use it on the computer. You don't have to be one or the other. You can use both, whatever your personal choice is. And we have found so far that it's been very, very secure, as we only you have to sign in and register for it and be allowed to become a member on our Slack channel. So it's not like somebody's going to go out there and fish for your information. So just wanted to check it out. Send an email to slack@mnastro.org and Chris will get you set up for the next part. And obviously MAS has a YouTube channel, which has all of our monthly meetings posted. We have the beginner special interest videos posted, imaging how-tos posted out there as well, and some new member orientation. So if you're new, feel free to go out to the MAS channel and check it out. There's some good information, good benefits for being part of the club. Even if you didn't know, there's still some there that are always applicable. And we have 2 years worth of recordings. So anything that you wanted to see prior in the 2 years or just get a nice little history of the MAS on YouTube, it is there for your perusal. And it keeps growing because every time we post or every time we have a meeting, we post something new. So keep an eye on that. It's a good thing. And I think I saw Antone online, and I'm wondering if you could post or unmute a little bit and talk about our Loaner Scope program?
Well, yes, I can. And as always, members may borrow our telescopes. We have 18 in our fleet now. You access the telescopes through our website under members, Loaner Scope program. You can look at what we have. And then there's a form to fill out that will send an email to me, and then I'll contact you about arranging a pickup of the telescope in my driveway. The telescopes may be used for 1 month, and we also have a library of DVDs. In fact, Trina can tell you about one that she just wrapped up in the last week or so. So any questions?
Sounds great. I'm glad the dinosaur was able to take care of that for us.
Yes,
If you don't know about the dinosaur, you have to check out and go to borrow a Loaner Scope or a DVD to find out what the telescope, what the dinosaur is about. Just a tidbit for you to check out our Loaner Scope program. Oop, hang on. There we go. We're still not over COVID, although it is getting better. But however, if you are feeling ill or just under the weather, please stay home. We would rather have you tune in from at home rather than here at the meeting hall. Even though we'd love to see your faces. I mean, I get to actually see everybody in the daytime right now, sort of, instead of out in the field. So it's really nice. But speaking of the field, we have some sky events before the next time we meet in April. We have the spring equinox. I don't know if anybody here ever tries to balance an egg. I don't know. I don't know if it works. Maybe. I prefer just to take a few of them and scramble it. So, that would be my preferred method of celebrating the equinox. But we do also have, pointing out our favorite celestial body in our sky there. We have the full moon on March 7th. That way it's close to, being able to scramble your eggs. So that's good. The last quarter moon on the 14th, the new moon, which we all love, on the 21st, and first quarter on the 28th. And then we're back to a full moon on April 5th, which is, I think, why we have our meetings at the beginning of the month. Yes, Merle. Yep, I'm going to get to that one. So thank you for the transition into our upcoming star parties. We have, as Merle mentioned, it's at home, sorry, you guys didn't hear that one, but March 25th is ELO's first public star party, even though we've had a couple already with the comets and the candlelight hay rides and stuff. But we do have that, and they are at Baylor Regional Park in Norway, Young America. Check out the website or on the forums. They start at 7 p.m. for information regarding that. We also have an upcoming new one, which I'm going to call on Mark here to talk about, which is on March 24th. And that is with our Cedar Creek Ecosystem Science Reserve, or as it's shorter, I just call it Cedar Creek, or some people call CC. But I will let Mark take a few moments to talk about all of that.
Thanks, Trina. Cedar Creek, the Cedar Creek Ecosystem Science Reserve, yeah, CCESR. We're having a star party up there. It's a relationship that we're building between them and us, more for them to more utilize their property and their grounds because of they use it during the day, and they go, well, why can't we use it at night too? So we, and I see John Popley is in the audience tonight. He started grooming that, and that's a great relationship that is growing. We were really on a great track before COVID, so we've kind of had to hit the restart. But we are having another star party. We're going to start this year again and have a star party every few months. And the first one we're having is March 24th. Just to correct you a little bit, Trina, is that's a Friday or a Saturday night, depending upon which night is better. It's
right. The 24th is a Friday, whereas the 25th is a Saturday.
And if it's cloudy Friday, we'll have it Saturday if it's cloudy.
Okay.
I think it's down for the 24th, but it's an either or thing.
And I believe that's on the website, right, Baltz? Okay.
Yeah. So if I think we're okay set for volunteers. There's you know, we always have more volunteers than we have people that show up. Which is okay, but what we were doing before is we were canceling if they were cloudy. So we kind of lost some continuity there. So now we've decided, well, the rain or shine events, and we'll put on a program. And that's what we're going to continue to do. This first one is, we're going to, you know, bring your telescope if you have one, and we'll show you how to use it. And if you don't have one, or you're looking for one, it's the same way. We have ours there. So we'll do that.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yep, it's a how-to event.
It's a how-to event,
Yep.
especially if it's cloudy.
Yep, exactly. And speaking of volunteers, which kind of ties in with the other volunteers, that with the ELO Star Party, more people for volunteers is always welcome. Whether it's, and you don't have to be a key holder to do it. On certain aspects of the ELO Star Parties, you can come out, you can help direct people, you can answer questions. And also I believe that at noon, correct, Merle? There is a key holder training, which is listed on the forum, so you can sign up. So you could become a key holder that day and try out your new information on the, you know, that evening with the public Star Party. So, and we also have, which I think I notated down there on JJC on March 18th, is that particular key holder training, which is also on the forums. Just go out to JJC, and there should be a string on there that says for you to sign up. That starts at noon. Both of them are at noon. Yep. And we have upcoming beginner special interest group, which I believe is still a virtual for this particular one before we start the in-person on the field. And that is going to be featuring Ahmed Reda with Middle Eastern astronomy, which I'm very interested in finding out what's going on with that, and how it compares to regular Western astronomy and its differences. So tune in on March 11th at 1 o'clock via Zoom. Go on to the MAS homepage and follow at the bottom, you'll follow the calendar link to get into that particular Zoom link. So hopefully I'll be able to see everybody there. Gemini articles. Everybody loves reading the Gemini articles, at least. Okay, maybe it's just me. But okay, raise your hand in the room of how many people read the Gemini articles and really enjoy it. Awesome, everybody. Hopefully everybody at home raised their hands too. If not, it also is shown in our MAS happenings, but the Gemini articles are all of the articles that you as a member have written. It's not from any outside source. It's and it's a wide variety. You can talk about your latest astronomy trip. You can talk about how you set up for your astronomy in the backyard. You can talk about astrophotography and everything that you've learned about that. The range is very, very wide. I've written a couple of articles. I know a few people in here have written one. So I believe that the next deadline is March 10th for articles that are going to be published in April, or if there's not enough room, it will be held over for the next 2 months later, because it is published 6 times a year. And Father Brown is always happy to get articles, and he will publish all of them. Have no worries. So the MAS happenings, like I said, does publish the Gemini articles, but it also publishes on, as long as you get it by Thursday night tonight, on Tuesday, any information that's regarding for the next week. Send that over to secretary@mnastro.org. And Dave has been doing a great job with getting them out and looking great and having his own little tweaks in there, taking over from me. So it's improving. It's great. So thank you very much for doing that. Astronomical League Awards. I wish Jerry was here to help talk about that. He has so much great energy. But unfortunately he isn't. So it's just me telling you what they are if you're a new member and don't know what this is. These are observing programs that are designed to provide a direction for your observations and to give you a goal. The programs have certificates and pins, which I have some bling if anybody's interested in seeing what those are. But and it's just for recognition. You could do them for fun, but also to give you a kind of a direction if you're losing which way to go for a direction. It's like, you've done it all. Like, okay, now what do I do? Check out one of them. And there's a wide variety. You can do with binoculars, you can do it with cameras, you can do it visually. There's only a few that do not require the visual, or that do not allow that need the visual only to complete it. Some of the other ones, you just read the instructions. You probably can do the camera version or the go-to version. Because there's at least 50 that are there. So I'm sure you'll find one that's interested into it. Unfortunately, there isn't anyone that completed anything in February. I can't believe that. I think this is the first time that I've been in part of the club that we've not had somebody complete a program. So I'm hoping that next month I will see one of your names into it. And there's also on the forum too, a special interest group, observing special interest group subforum, where Jerry likes to have us post out there some of our adventures. And I like reading those too. So if you don't want to post it, on an MAS happenings or in the Gemini, post it on the forum so the rest of us can read it. That'd be appreciated. And as Jerry says, I can't do it as well as he can, get out there and observe. Yes. Now this time we would normally have Better Know a Constellation, but we're pushing that aside because we have a special presenter tonight whose name will be coming up in the next slide or two. But I am looking for a volunteer to create one for April, so that, and it doesn't have to be very long. It's 15 to 20 minutes. You don't have to talk as much as I do, and people will probably enjoy it a little bit more than listening to me, which is fine. I can handle it. But time does go quickly. I mean, I don't know how long I've been talking, and I guess you guys are probably bored with me, but that's all right. I'm good. So Better Know a Constellation doesn't even have to be about a constellation. It can be about anything. I know it's crazy, but it's a good filler. It's great in here. So if you want to talk about how you set up your backyard observatory, that'll work too. I look forward to somebody who's going to send me an email later on to say they're going to do it. I just know it. I know it. Which brings me to our next meeting, which is going to be April 6th. I had to double check that date because March and February were the same dates, because it kind of gave me a little confusion. But we will be having Chuck Allen from the Astronomical League come here and talk about, I'm assuming, the Astronomical League. He hasn't determined a topic of conversation. Okay. So we will keep you informed. We'll update on the website, and obviously we'll find out next month when he arrives. The Astronomical League is always really good information about the club, our parent society, the people we pay our extra dues to keep us into our little bling that some people have, other people have to earn. And now we have our actual next feature presentation. And so if Dave wants to come up here and get ready, we'll transfer certain screens. Yeah, we'll be back in about 2 minutes. So go grab your water, potty break, whatever you need. I just want to introduce Dave Falkner. He is your current secretary. He is also part of the CGO committee and a former president of the MAS a couple of different times. He is also your ACEAP ambassador, as well as a NASA ambassador. And he's going to talk about his amazing trip that he took in December and tell us all about what he learned in South America. So here he is, everybody.
Good evening, everybody. For those of you who are in the room here, I'm going to start a little show and tell here. This is a piece of glass here. Why don't you just inspect it, kind of take a look at it, pass around. I'll explain what this is a little later in the presentation. Here, got that? Okay. Kind of dark in here. Yeah, kind of dark in here, but it's a piece of glass. I'm going to take it and start passing it around there. Okay. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. No. No. This presentation is about ACEAP 2020, 2 years late, and that'll come into, that'll become obvious here as we move along. So what is ACEAP? ACEAP is Astronomy in Chile Educator Ambassadors Program. It's a program that was set up a few years ago to allow astronomy enthusiasts, I guess you'd put them, whether they be educators or informal educators, to get the opportunity to go down to Chile and see the U.S. observatories down there and get up close and personal to a lot of the telescopes. And then it has two goals, really. And that's the first goal. The first goal is to inform amateur astronomers and formal and informal educators about the facilities that are down in Chile and what's going on, along with the STEM programs that are going on down there. We'll talk a little bit about that too. And then the second goal is to have those people come back to the United States and talk to groups such as this and the general public about the Chilean facilities, because a lot of people don't even know we have telescopes down in Chile, let alone, you know, what telescopes are down there, what are they doing, okay? And we have some pretty amazing facilities down there for sure. I first heard about this about, I think it was 2015, when a gal by the name of Sarah Koppelrud, her name's Sarah Devine now, I think she worked for the Bell Museum at the time, and she came and she got into this program, and she was able to do this program. And I had been to Kitt Peak and I've been to Mount Lemmon. I really loved visiting those research facilities. And when she talked about these telescopes down in Chile, I thought, wow, this is really cool. You know, I'd really like to do this. So I got the information, and it turns out you submit your application in the fall each year. It's a rather lengthy application. And then they make their selection. It's about 10 people every year that they select nationally. So I knew my chances were kind of slim, but I kind of took the astronaut approach. You know, you just keep putting it in, right? Each year you put in another application, hope that you get picked. And I did that for 2016, 2017, so on and so forth. And then 2019, I put in my application and didn't get selected. And that was for the 2020 cohort. But of course, COVID hit. And when COVID hit, it all came to a screeching halt. So I didn't really think too much about it. And then I remember vividly, it was July 1st. It was a Friday, and 2022. And I just finished up with work, and I was getting ready to shut down for the day. I thought, I'll check my personal email just to see what's in there. And got an email from Tim Spuck. Now, Tim Spuck is the guy who kind of runs this program. And oh yeah, so there it is, kind of delayed. Okay, from Tim Spuck, and I thought, well, he's just inviting me to, you know, apply once again. Now they got the program moving again, but no. It said this is, you know, out of the blue, kind of last minute. But the 2020 cohort had been delayed for 2 years because of COVID, and we're then going down on July 22nd to Chile. And somebody had to drop out of the group. I was the first alternate. Was I interested in joining their group? Yes, I was. So he wanted an answer back by Sunday. I had an answer back to him within 2 hours. And I began, you know, gathering all the things that I needed for this trip, because I only had about 21 days before I was going to be there. So I had to, you know, buy clothes and stuff. It's winter down there, so it would be a little cool. And my passport, I had to get that all squared away and stuff like that. And so, you know, I scrambled to get all that done. And then a week before we were supposed to arrive down there, the area got hit with a freak snowstorm. It dumped 1.8 meters of snow. If you convert that, that's about 70. That's 70 inches of snow on the mountaintop. Shut the thing down completely. They had to evacuate people out of there. So it was clear that if we went down at that time, we would not be able to see the big telescopes, and that kind of defeated the whole purpose of going down there. So we decided to delay our visit down there, and it got delayed until December. And so we went December 9th through the 19th. We just lost, there we go. Matt, you're killing me. You're just killing me, man. Okay. I put this list up here. This is the list of people who are on my particular group. Just to point out, we're from all over the United States. all walks of life. Most of these folks were not into astronomy education as a primary career. A lot of them are doing other things and did amateur astronomy and outreach, just like myself. But they were very learned, very, very knowledgeable people, and frankly, great people to be with. One of them was Alan Strauss, and I'll come back to Alan Strauss because he's kind of a key player for this piece of glass we're passing around the room here. So why Chile? What makes Chile so great to be there for astronomy? Well, first of all, Chile is a very long, very narrow country, 2,600 miles long, only a couple hundred miles wide. Okay, kind of sits between the Pacific Ocean and the Andes Mountains. Then the northern part of Chile, because of ocean currents and all, it turns out that the air mass that's over this region is extremely stable. Okay, it's a desert area. They get 0.2 inches of rain per year normally, which is why that snowstorm was really a freak snowstorm. The other thing, of course, is that it's a mountainous area, plenty of mountains to put telescopes on top of. And the other reason is that the government itself is very stable as well. And they love having the observatories down there. And the people have embraced astronomy as well. Not only do they work at the observatories that are being built down there, but they also have an astrotourism business that does very well down there. All that makes Chile a really great hotbed for astronomy. And you know, we've got the United States down there, we've got Europe down there, Korea's down there, China, just about every country's down there with telescopes. About 70% of the world's astronomy infrastructure is in Chile. Everything's metric down there, so I'll be talking metric. I just thought I'd give you a quick lesson, you know, because some of us don't remember exactly how long a meter is or how long a kilometer is. So telescopes are measured in meters, right? The primary mirror, the diameter of the primary mirror or the primary dish for radio astronomy is measured in meters. And altitudes are also measured in meters, okay? We were at 2,300 and 2,700 meters and 3,000 meters and 5,000 meters. I'll give you the feet too when we get to it. And then, of course, distances between towns were in kilometers. I'm going to focus primarily on the observatories at first. If time permits, I want to talk about some of the cultural things that we were also exposed to while we were down there. We did some sightseeing in Santiago. We went to one of those astro-tourism observatories, and we visited a couple of interesting nature preserves down there as well. So I'll talk about those. So everything started in Santiago. I took a flight from Minneapolis to Atlanta, and then from Atlanta to Santiago. That was 8.5 hours, red eye overnight. Arrived in the morning. And then most of us arrived in the morning. There were a few who had delays for one reason or another, didn't get there till the evening. And we did some sightseeing in Santiago, which I'll talk about later if we had enough time. And then the first night, we just kind of got together for an informal dinner and started enjoying some of that great Chilean food. The guy in the far left here with the glasses is Tim Spuck. He was kind of the leader of the group. And the rest of us, of course, were from all over the country. The next day was orientation day. So we went to the AUI offices. Now there's a lot of acronyms here, and I'm going to explain the acronyms as we get to them. So, the AUI office, the AUI was what Tim worked for. And we got an orientation on the facilities themselves and who ran them, some safety things, because we're going to be up at altitude, so you kind of had to, you know, monitor yourself and make sure you were health-wise, you're in good shape. And then we also had a couple of ladies who came and talked about outreach because they do outreach there, and in particular, they mentor and outreach to the young women who are in high school and college in Chile. As we all know, the sciences in general do not have a representative number of women. But in countries like Chile, it's even worse because just the culture there does not really encourage women to seek science, technology, engineering, and math types of careers. So they have a real robust outreach program to encourage women to do that. So the three facilities that sponsored us were AUI, which is the Associated Universities Incorporated, and then AURA, which is the Association of Universities for Research in Astronomy, and the National Science Foundation. AUI is kind of the administrative piece. They handle the contracts, they handle the HR, salaries, all that part of it. And AURA handled more of the operational side. So they handle transportation, residence halls, cafeterias, building maintenance, but not the equipment, just the buildings themselves. And then National Science Foundation is kind of umbrella over that, and they help to fund it, but not solely. As you may have figured out here, the Associated Universities is a conglomerate of a number of universities that got together to form the nonprofit, and all of them help to financially support this as well. So that night we had our first formal, hey, we're here dinner with the two gals who did the STEM research. And again, some great Chilean food and very good wine as well. So we did not go hungry there. Let me tell you that. We did very well on that. Our first stop was going up to La Serena and the Noir Lab observatories. La Serena is a very nice coastal town. It's kind of a resort town. We actually stayed at a hotel that was on the coast there. Right across the road there is the ocean. And that was a kind of a peninsula that stuck out there. Had a cross on top of it. The Pannon is from my room. So we had, it's a nice facility. We did okay. That evening we did go to the observatory, the Trieste Observatory. And I'll talk about that later when we get to it. But the next day we packed up and we left and headed up into the mountains to the Noir Lab observatories. You can see that we go along the road there for a couple of hours, and finally you see where it splits off from Highway 41, and then there's another one that goes up. That's a private road down there. I don't know if we can see that or not, but and that road is gated and is run by AURA and AUI. So Noir Lab. Noir Lab stands for the National Optical and Infrared Laboratories. You may have known NOAO, which is the old version of this, the National Optical Astronomy Observatory. So this Noir Lab kind of took over for that. And so they do all the optical telescopes around the world. So that the US owns. So that would be Kitt Peak Observatory, for instance, the Gemini North and Gemini South telescopes, and then the CTIO, which we're going to visit here, Cerro Tololo, as well as the Vera C. Rubin Observatory, which is at Cerro Pachon, along with the Gemini South telescope. And then you also have the Community Science and Data Center, because all the data that they collect eventually becomes public. And if you have the right software, you can download the files and be able to use that data yourself and Photoshop it, whatever you need to do with it. So the first stop we went to was Cerro Pachon. Cerro Pachon is home of 3 telescopes. The one on the left is the SOAR telescope. The one in the middle is the Vera Rubin telescope. And the one in the right is the Gemini South telescope. This was at an altitude of 2,700 meters. That's roughly 8,000 feet. We were up there. This is kind of a map of this area. At the top there, you see they're all along a ridge there. So on the one in the blue building on the left is the Vera Rubin. The building in the center is the Gemini, and the building on the right would be the SOAR telescope. And we, and like I said, they're kind of right along the ridge there. So it was fun getting up there. The roads are actually a little wider than they appear there, but we started with the Gemini South telescope. So this is a twin to the Gemini North telescope, Cassegrain type telescope, which you all are aware of. But I've tried to generalize this presentation, so we'll talk a little bit about that. But it's an 8.1 meter mirror. at the 1 meter secondary mirror, uses adaptive optics, has a laser for artificial star, and is the most infrared optimized ground-based telescopes in the world. I'll talk a little bit about that too. Cassegrain telescopes, as we know, light comes into the main mirror, reflects back to a secondary, or in some cases, there's an instrument at prime focus that could be mounted there as well. And then it's reflected back through the main mirror to equipment that's behind the main mirror. We started out in the control room there, and of course it's all computerized with a bunch of screens. They also monitor the weather, and they monitor the environments of the observatory itself. All of the observatories up there were air conditioned, which I thought was kind of interesting. But they're air conditioned to a very specific temperature. They're air conditioned to the temperature that it's going to be at 9 p.m. that night, because that's when they open up the observatories. And so their telescopes are immediately acclimated to the outdoor air because they've already cooled it all day long. So they keep it at that temperature. Interesting thing about this is that they can control either Gemini North or Gemini South from the same control room. Likewise, Gemini North can be controlled either. Hence, they have the clock up there with both times on it. Hawaii, yeah, right. Because Gemini North is at Mauna Kea in Hawaii. Yep, no, it's in. I'm sorry, Gemini North is in Mauna Kea in Hawaii, and that's the Gemini South telescope. Pretty good sized telescope. It was exciting to see. It's an 8.1 meter telescope, but the usable aperture is 8 meters. The outside half meter is masked off to keep from having spurious light or anything like that. So that's it. That's an alt-azimuth mount, and the equipment for that. So behind the mirror is all the equipment, and so you've got all the detectors there. You've got the GPI, which is the Gemini Planet Imager, which can image planets around nearby stars that are 1/millionth as bright as their host star. Which one was me? Okay, let's see. Yeah, where am I in here? Green shirt. Yep, fourth from the right. Yep, that's me. Fourth from the right. Yeah. So the Gemini Planet Imager. Then they also have the near infrared camera and spectrographs. The Gemini multi-object spectrograph, which can take spectrographs of multiple objects simultaneously, as well as the acquisition and guidance instruments. We'll talk about that in a minute. Okay. Just we know about this, but just to talk about light, these are primarily attuned to the visible light and just inside the infrared spectrum there. Most of the telescopes were just visible light type telescopes, didn't do too much infrared. We also went to ALMA eventually, which is the radio telescopes in the microwave area, looking from the right there. So those are the frequencies that we were dealing with the Noir Lab and ALMA. So as you can see, we got up close and personal to the mirror. I could just about touch the mirror if I wanted to. Got right next to it. Pretty impressive. On the right, so the horizontal shaft, I guess you call the altitude shaft, comes into a bearing, and they pressurize that bearing with oil so that the shaft actually rides on a very, very thin film of oil, which makes it virtually frictionless. So if you disconnected all the drives from it, you can move the whole telescope with your 2 fingers. Just push it. That's amazing. Huh? Better than a Dob, yeah. Below the main observatory, kind of in the basement, if you would, of the building, is where the recoding chamber is. So they wash the mirror periodically. There's a couple of methods they use for that. One of them, which I think is really interesting, is they take carbon dioxide frost. Okay, carbon dioxide, of course, turns immediately into a vapor at room temperature. So what they do is they spray the frost onto the mirror, and the dust particles in the mirror get caught up in the frost, and when the frost evaporates, it takes the dust with it. They also use this thing, which is really weird, but it's horse soap, and I don't know exactly what that is, but it's a non-abrasive soap, and they have these special sponges, And they can actually wash the mirror with these special sponges in this horse soap and do that as well to wash the mirrors. Rather interesting. The coating chamber, of course, is to recoat it. They recoat it about every 5 years. Okay. Now I mentioned that these are tuned to be the most optimized in the visible and near infrared ground-based telescopes. Different coatings have different reflectivities at different frequencies, right? So we use aluminized coatings for the visible. That is the best reflective. The James Webb Space Telescope, because it deals more in the infrared, actually has gold coating on its mirrors because that reflects better at those frequencies. And this one has silver, actual silver as the coating on it. But silver has two nasty little properties. One is that it tends to tarnish, so you got to make sure you seal it really well so it doesn't tarnish. The other is that it doesn't adhere to glass very well. So what they do is, and I show it here, they have a layer, the substrate's the glass, and then you have the nickel chromium layer, which provides the adhesiveness for the silver layer. And then you have another nickel chromium layer and then the silicon layer on top to completely seal it. So I thought that was kind of interesting. These are the various countries that support this telescope. From left to right, you've got Korea, Argentina, United States, Brazil, Canada, and you can't quite see it, but way over on the far right is a Chilean flag. Because Chile allows the United States to build their telescopes on their land, they automatically get 10% telescope time on every telescope that's out there. So I thought that was kind of interesting. This is a NOIR lab shot. We were there in the evening. We left in the afternoon to go over to CTIO. So we didn't see this at night, but this is what it looks like when you open up the vents on the side to really let the air come through at night. And then of course the laser for the artificial star. It uses adaptive optics. I show this. I think most of us are familiar with this because the atmosphere distorts starlight a little bit. It comes through, comes off the mirror. They take a sample of that, run it through a computer and actuators, and then there's actuators behind the mirror that will distort the mirror to counteract the distortion of the atmosphere, and it works pretty well. There's before and after when you have adaptive optics, so works really, really well. Of course, Gemini has been involved in a lot of different things, and some of them are pretty technical and didn't want to get into a lot of it. But one of them I thought was interesting was that it caught the sharpest image ever of the most massive star that we know of in the universe. Obviously, we see individual stars mostly in our own galaxy, but this one happens to be in the Large Magellanic Cloud, which is just outside of our galaxy. It's 163,000 light years away. Originally, they thought that it was 300 times that of the sun, the mass of this star. But with the new measurements and with the Gemini telescope, they now know it's about 170 to 130 times the mass of the sun. For all you imaging geeks out there, they used a Zorro camera, which is the Spanish word for fox. It's just a fast, low noise camera. And then the DSSI is the Differential Spectral Survey Instrument. It's a wide field diffraction limited imager. And by using those two and capturing this, they have a resolution of 30 milliarcseconds. The exposure time was 60 milliseconds, and it took 40,000 images over 40 minutes. And by doing that, they were able to get an image that is slightly sharper than what James Webb Space Telescope gets and 3 times sharper than the Hubble Space Telescope. So that's pretty good. The star itself is R136A1. We're all very familiar with that, I'm sure. It's 35 times bigger than our sun, 9 million times more luminous than our sun, with a surface temperature of about 10 times hotter than our sun. So if we put the Earth around that star at the same distance from our sun, it would go around in 3 weeks. And that's how fast we need to go. From there, we went over to the SOAR telescope on the same mountain. SOAR stands for the Southern Astrophysical Research Telescope. Those are the 4 entities that are running this and maintain this telescope. It's a 4.1 meter telescope. we got in there, and those little triangle things are the covers for this telescope. So they just fold down over the mirror on that telescope. It has a fiberglass dome with adaptive optics, 120 actuators. You can actually see them in this next picture here. There's little actuators in the bottom there. And this one, instead of having all of the equipment hung underneath the telescope, they actually have a third mirror that routes the light to the side. And you can see to the right where they have some of the equipment that is used with that telescope. In addition, yeah, we've got this. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but this cable right here. Can you see that? That's a big fiber optic cable. They call it the Python, and it routes the light from there to this large black instrument, which is not attached to the telescope. It's separate from the telescope, but the Python fiber optic cable goes in there, and that is the Goodman high throughput spectrograph. The tertiary mirror on that is capable of redirecting light within 60 seconds. So they can do a number of different projects in the course of the night. Talk a little bit about spectroscopy, but yeah, you know about this continuous spectrum. We detect elements either through their absorption or their emission spectrum. We can tell what elements are in by what lines are there, and we can also tell whether they're coming toward us or away from us by whether they're shifted to the red end or to the blue end from a unshifted spectrum. Oops, sorry, too many. So I chose this one. This is kind of interesting. So you remember, I think it was last summer, NASA had a spacecraft that slammed into an asteroid, right? It was the DART mission, double asteroid redirection test. And it was part of their asteroid or the Earth defense system, right, from asteroids. They wanted to see if they could move an asteroid by slamming a spacecraft into it. They chose this double asteroid, Dimorphos and Didymus. Dimorphos is 530 feet in diameter, and Didymus is 2,560 feet in diameter. And so they're about 53 million miles from the Earth. And so they slammed the spacecraft in there. It weighed about 1,260 pounds. It's basically a 4-foot box with solar panels on it. And it hit at about 14,000 miles per hour and shortened the orbital period from 11 hours and 55 minutes to 11 hours and 23 minutes, which exceeded their expectations by 25 times, which is kind of nice. This particular image was taken 2 days after the spacecraft hit, and it shows the dust plume that was kicked up by the spacecraft when it hit. That's about 10,000 kilometers long. So I thought that's pretty good to get an image like that far away. And so with a very small asteroid. The Vera C. Rubin Observatory. You may know this as the Large Synoptic Survey Telescope. They renamed it. Okay, it's now the Simone Telescope in the Vera Rubin Observatory. It will have an 8.4 meter mirror installed in it. We were there, as you can see the cranes on the side there. It was still under construction. We would have been able to go into the observatory had we all had steel-toed shoes, but we didn't, so couldn't go in there. So we didn't get to see the inside of the observatory. The telescope was in there without its mirror. I'll show you where the mirror was. And then this has got a 3,200 megapixel camera in it. It's roughly the size of a car. It's got a 5-foot mirror, not mirror, 5-foot lens in front of the detectors. And the amazing thing about this is they've got it set up so that it's going to take an image every 20 seconds. So it takes 15-second image, moves in 5 seconds to its next location, and settles, and takes the next picture right away, which that's pretty amazing. It will image the entire sky once every week, roughly, if they don't get distracted and doing something else. It's got an 8.4 meter primary, a 1.8 meter secondary, and a 1.1 meter tertiary mirror. We were able to go into the control room there. This is the control room for the Vera Rubin. Lots of big screens. Again, they can monitor the weather. They can monitor the telescope itself, as well as whatever they're looking at during the course of the evening. Next to the Vera Rubin Observatory was another observatory called the Rubin Auxiliary Telescope. It was 1.2 meters. Okay, it's basically the finder scope for the Vera Rubin. And they're using it for analyzing star spectra. They get some atmospheric measurements. There's a little tower next to it. It's kind of a weather tower, and doing catalog corrections. And then to the right there, that squarish building, that's where the mirror is being stored right now. Okay. This is a picture of the mirror before it was actually polished, after being cast, but not polished. That glass I showed you. Okay. So this was made at the Seward Laboratory at the University of Arizona, and Alan Strauss happened to be on our trip. He is the program director for the Seward Lab and for Mount Lemmon. So he's taken people on tours of this thing, and he talks about the fact that this is a piece of glass that they get in this whole batch of glass that's in chunks like this, and the way they make these mirrors is they pour that glass into the mold and then melt the glass while they're turning the form. Depending on the curvature of the mirror, it's how fast they turn the form. And they melt all that glass down, and then they let it cool. And it takes weeks to do this. Okay, this particular piece of glass. So when they get the glass in, they inspect the glass to see if it meets their requirements. This happened to be bound for the number 5 Giant Magellan telescope mirror, okay, but it was rejected. So this is a piece of rejected glass from the number 5 Giant Magellan telescope. And so he bought everybody a piece of glass, which I thought was pretty cool. Okay. So the Vera Rubin is expected to do a few things. They're going to probe dark matter and dark energy and take an inventory of the solar system, as well as exploring transient optical sky and mapping the Milky Way. And that's obviously a rendering of the telescope. And here we all are. And I am third from the right there, if you want to know. And yeah, that's okay. And we're all there at the Vera Rubin. So that was kind of fun. After we saw the Vera Rubin, we went, and the Cerro Tololo is only about 10 kilometers away. In fact, you could see it from the summit of the Paris Cerro Pachon. And so we just hopped back into our bus and went back around to the Cerro Tololo, where we stayed the evening. CTIO stands for Cerro Tololo Inter-American Observatory. It's the first really major observatory that the United States had down there. We went over there and then kind of unpacked, got our rooms, because we stayed 2 nights there, and had dinner, and then went to the summit to watch sunset. This is a map of it. All the green buildings there are telescopes. There's over 45 telescopes that are on this mountain. I'm not going to tell you about every single telescope. So I'll tell you about some of the major ones, and there's a lot of groups of telescopes too, and I'll talk about that too. The yellow buildings were like the residence halls, the cafeteria, the office buildings, and the like, and then the brown buildings are the maintenance facilities. This is located at about 2,300 meters, 2,300 meters, which is about 7,500 feet. So that's how high we were for that. That evening, after dinner, we went up to the summit and watched the sunset. It was quite beautiful. I saw the green flash. I didn't get a photo of the green flash, but I did see the green flash. And then we stayed up there for the evening, and the best skies I've ever seen. Here we are spelling out ACEAP up there, a group of us just kind of having a little fun. Huh? I'm not in that. No, I was watching from the side. But the sky up there was just truly amazing. It's not even dark here. And you can see the large and small Magellanic Cloud easily. They did bring, of course, these telescopes all have equipment attached to them. They don't have eyepieces. So they did bring up a C11 for us to look through, which is kind of nice. But, saw the Tarantula Nebula and Toucan 49, lots of, a couple of planets are up too. The sky down there is very disorienting, though, okay? Because you're south. So all the constellations that I'm accustomed to seeing are all upside down, and everything's moving from right to left, and the moon phases are backwards, and the ecliptic is to the north. And it's like, it's very disorienting at first. And so you kind of got to get used to it. But the seeing was amazing, absolutely amazing. So stayed up there until later tonight. We had to get up early in the morning to do our tour. So I had to stay up all night, but it was good. So this is an aerial view, a Google Maps view, if you would, of the summit. Now, this is like looking at the full moon. Okay, so this looks really flat. It's not. It's not flat at all. Okay. Toward the top of the summit, they paved all the roads. So all the roads are gravel till you get toward the top of the summit of the area, and then they're all paved, and that's to keep the dust down. But it was also great because when you're wandering around from the summit to get back to your room at night, and there's a lot of different roads and stuff like that, and you kind of get lost. If you run out of paved road, you've gone too far. So you got to turn around and start heading back. We had a guy wander around for about an hour up there because he lost his way. And then they found him and he got back to his room. Yeah, he was heading down from the summit and the roads kind of split off and you just kind of lose your way. So we're going to go the next day we took a tour of the CCIO site. Okay. We started at the top and worked our way down. So all I gotta do is find my cursor now. Let's see. Okay, there's that. So it's gotta go down. And we'll start here. Okay. So this is the summit. If we look at a map of the summit, we have the Victor Blanco telescope, 4-meter telescope, 1.5-meter SMARTS telescope. There's 3 SMARTS telescope there. I'll explain that in a minute. And the Curtis Schmidt and the Chase telescope were also up there, and a couple other ancillary telescopes. There I am up there. That's Victor Blanco on the left and the 1.5-meter SMARTS telescope on the right. It was summertime, right? But I'm wearing a long sleeves, kind of a lightweight shirt and long pants and nice floppy hat because the UV index up there is a little higher than it is here. I figured I kind of did some research, and in midsummer here in Minneapolis, UV index will get up to about 6. Okay. So again, on the mountaintop, we were typically with 8 to 10 was the UV index up there. So we had to kind of keep, watch ourselves, make sure we wore sunscreen and protected ourselves. So it worked out fine. The Victor Blanco telescope is a 4-meter telescope. How many have been to Kitt Peak here? Okay, this is a double of the Mayall telescope, built about the same time, it looks identical inside actually. So built in honor and named in honor of the Puerto Rican astronomer Victor Blanco. Don't know much about him, but there you go. It's a 4-meter Cassegrain telescope built in 1974. And just like the Mayall, they had this. They had kind of a control room that looks like it's out of the 70s, right? So they haven't updated it a whole lot, a little bit. They can control the telescope from either the control room here or up on the telescope floor. And then, in the morning when we were there, that's the first telescope we came to. First thing in the morning, they were doing maintenance on the telescope, so we weren't able to go into the observatory proper itself at that time. We did come back later. But they had the same thing that they have with the Mayall telescope, and that there's a gallery there with windows so you can see the telescope. You could go out there. And it was also kind of a museum too, because in there they had a bunch of instruments that were made specifically for the telescope, spectrographs and cameras. They showed the progression of imaging, CCD type things over time, and spectrographs and the like. So it was kind of interesting little display of historic items that they used on the telescope over time. Later on, after lunch, we went back up there and were able to go into to the telescope and stand up right next to it and take a look at it. The blue object on the left, that's the coating chamber for the 4-meter mirror that they have there. Okay. And then they invited us to come back in the evening and be there when they actually opened up the telescope for viewing that night. There's only 2 or 3 of us who actually did that. It's not an alt azimuth, but the whole floor of the telescope does move. Okay, the telescope itself is not an equatorial mount, but the floor will move around, and there's about I don't know, maybe a 4-foot section on the outside where you can stand and watch the thing move around. So I went ahead and took a movie of this. And first of all, they opened up the slit, okay, and then they opened up the vents on the side, let the air come through, okay. And that large yellow structure, that they could either have a camera at prime focus or the secondary mirror at prime focus. This one right now, I think it held the secondary mirror, and because they had a camera at prime focus for right now, so that's what held it. And then we're on the platform that moves right now. You kind of see the outside. There's a little ring on the outside there. We stepped out there when they started moving the telescope around to get it aligned for the nighttime viewing. So that's the next. So here I'm standing still, and the whole floor is moving. So it was a little breezy during the day, but it really died off at night. It was pretty calm at night. It was much windier in Alma for some reason, but that's not as big a deal for them. So, and it wasn't terribly cold because it was summer, but I would imagine if you're up there in July and winter, it's a little bit brisker. So, yeah, oh yeah, I'm sorry. This, yeah, this is sped up about 3 times, I think. Yeah. Didn't figure you wanted to sit here for 10 minutes watching this. So, it had 2 instruments that's attached to it. One is the Dark Sky Energy Survey camera that they used for a number of years, located at prime focus, detected the visible and near infrared survey of the sky and aimed at probing the dynamics of the expansion of the universe. And then there's that kind of thing that's draping there, the black thing, that's fiber optic cable that goes down to the cosmos, which is actually located underneath, behind the mirror. And that's the spectrograph itself. And that's the Saratoga, Ohio State multi-object spectrograph, which is a high efficiency spectrograph capable of photographing spectrums of multiple objects simultaneously. So those are the 2 main instruments on that. This happens to be an image taken by that telescope. It was part of a bright galaxy survey where they were looking for transient objects like nova and variable stars, things of that sort. This happens to be Centaurus A, which is about 12 million light years away, shot by an astronomer, Monica Soriam, now part of the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana. But as part of a long-term survey that took place between 2018 and 2021 to try and capture those objects. And it was kind of laid the foundation for the work that's going to be done by the Vera Rubin telescope when it gets up and running. Okay, so there's other telescopes up there, but in 2001, the precursor to Noir Lab, which was NOAO, made a decision that they were not going to fully support all the telescopes that were on the mountain. In fact, they would only support telescopes that were over 2 meters in diameter, which is not very many telescopes up there, actually. So the rest of the telescopes are considered Tenet telescopes, and they could pay Noir Lab if they wanted to have Noir Lab do some of the work, or they could just fund them themselves and do all the support themselves. SMARTS was one of those groups. SMARTS is a small and moderate aperture research telescopes. They had 4 telescopes up there. The one on the left there is a 1.5 meter telescope, which we did get to see. The one on the right is a 1.3 meter telescope, which wasn't at the summit. It was at a little bit lower level. And then the 2 other telescopes at the summit were the 0.9 meter telescope and the 1 meter telescope, both SMARTS telescope. This is the 1.5 meter SMARTS telescope. Again, you can see the covers that come up. The only thing they had on this was a high resolution spectrograph designed to measure star rotation velocities. Okay, I should tell you that the SMARTS consortium member institutions would fund and manage these telescopes. Okay, and then you can join their membership, right? And then you can pay by time on the telescopes, and then whichever telescope you wanted to. So they have members from a number of different universities, as well as even other countries that have time on this telescope. Our lab gets 25% of the observing time for helping to support it. And of course, Chile gets 10%, get 10% of all the time on it. So that's what the consortium is. And there's the telescope, and you can see the spectrograph at the bottom there. They actually capture the light, I believe, and route it down via fiber optic once again to the spectrograph. The other two telescopes were the SMARTS 1 meter and 0.9 meter. The 1 meter was a telescope that was at Yale and got moved up there in 1972. The other is a 0.9 meter telescope, Bullard and Stevens Cassegrain, built in 1965. Both are equipped with a camera, imaging camera. Other telescopes at Dutch Summit, we mentioned one was the Curtis Schmidt telescope. That's owned by the University of Michigan, named after Heber Curtis, director of the University of Michigan Observatory from 1930 to 1942, and one of the principal debaters in the Great Debate of 1920 on the size of the universe. It's just equipped with a camera. And then the Chilean Automatic Supernova Search Chase Telescope is a 0.5 meter telescope that does exactly what it sounds like it does. It looks for supernova. Okay, so we have done the summit now. Now we go over to this area over here. These are, again, these are all tenant telescopes owned by various organizations. And I'm going to, so this is the 1.3 meter telescope that I mentioned before. That's part of the SMARTS group, the three on the top. And then there's this telescope too. So it's off a little bit and down, it's down a little ways, not quite at the summit. Also there are the prompt telescopes, the panchromatic, robotic, optical monitoring, and polarimetry telescopes. Basically what you got here are 6.4 meter telescopes owned by the University of North Carolina. They're all identical, except they each have a different filter in them. And they're set up so that when there's a gamma ray burst, these guys are activated and they come and they all point to the same object, and they're taking images of the afterglow of the gamma ray burst with different filters on, trying to figure out what's going on with that gamma ray burst. They also have a 0.8 meter telescope there. And then when they're not looking for gamma ray bursts, these are used for the undergraduate and high school education throughout the state of North Carolina. Okay, and then there's this box that's right there. You see that? That is it's part of the Global Oscillation Network Group, or GONG, G-O-N-G. It's a 2.8 centimeter solar telescope designed to measure solar structure and dynamics. And you can't see the actual lens, it's on the other side of the box, but this is one of 6 stations around the world, and GONG is a community-based program. And the 6 stations, of course, are stationed all around so that can constantly monitor the sun. These 5 telescopes are part of Las Cumbres Observatory. That's a Las Cumbres Observatory Global Telescope Network, or 25 remotely controlled telescopes around the world. One of these was open. I was able to go in there, and it was a 1 meter plane wave. And I thought, well, we need one of those. So there are 1 meter plane waves and the 3 dome ones. The 2 roll-off roof observatories were basically 16-inch Ritchie Cretan Meads. All of them are equipped with cameras, 4K cameras. The Las Cumbres Observatory Global Telescope Network is available to both scientists and education observers, primarily used for transient optical events ranging from seconds to several years. Okay. And this is the University of Wisconsin H alpha mapper. It's hydrogen alpha, but not looking at the sun. It studies the structure of the Milky Way and the distribution and kinematics of diffuse ionized gas in the Milky Way. Built in 2009, operated by the University of Wisconsin. So yeah, one other telescope I want to talk about is kind of off to the side there. over there, this is the KMT Net Korea Microlensing Telescope Network. So there's 3 of these telescopes, one in South Africa, one in Australia, and one in Chile, and they actually detect exoplanets through microlensing, gravitational microlensing. Okay. So from there, we went to ALMA, the Atacama Large Millimeter Submillimeter Array. So that was the day at CTIO. That evening, we did, again, go up in the summit to do some more observing at night. And then we left the next day. The entire next day was just transiting to ALMA. So the first thing we had to do is drive back to La Serena, ride the bus back to La Serena, get to the airport, catch a flight, go down to Santiago, switch flights to Santiago, and then fly up to Calama on the right there. As you can see, Calama is about 3 times farther away than La Serena was. And then we landed in Calama, only to find out that not all of our luggage made it, including yours truly. So some made it, some didn't. I'll show you what became of that. Then we rented 3 pickup trucks there and drove caravan style out to the ALMA Operations Support Facility, which is right there. Okay, and then the array itself is about 28 kilometers farther down to the right there. Okay. ALMA is actually a collaboration, international partnership between the National Science Foundation, the National Institute of Natural Sciences in Japan, and the European Southern Observatory. They also collaborate with the National Research Council of Canada, Ministry of Science and Technology in Taiwan, the Korean Astronomy and Space Institute, or CASI, and all of them, of course, in cooperation with the Republic of Chile, right? We're still on Chilean land. So this is the operations center here. Consists of residential buildings, the cafeteria. They have recreation facilities there too, and then a large support facility for the antennae themselves. This is me getting my luggage at noon the next day. What was really cool about this, though, was that I had an Apple AirTag in my bag. So I knew exactly where my luggage was. It just wasn't with me. But I could see it in Santiago. I could see it in Calama. You know, it was just amazing that you could track things with that Apple AirTag. And it worked very, very well. And I eventually got it. On the right are the residence facilities there. This was built by the European Southern Observatory, and they did it right. I mean, the rooms were beautiful. It was like living in a hotel. They're very, very nice residence halls, and the cafeteria was great. Of course, the food was great. So this is located about 3,000 meters or 10,000 feet. So that's where we're at there at that point. No, they brought it to us. They brought it to us, yeah. In fact, so there are about half of us who had this luggage. And they packed all that to a little Toyota Corolla. I think it was packed to the brim. I mean, there's a back seat, front seat. I mean, I think one person had 2 people in it too, somehow. It was just amazing how they packed all the luggage in there and they brought it out. So this is a control room for ALMA. I'll talk a little more about what ALMA is, but this control room was at the support facility. It communicated with the array site up at 5,000 meters, the array support site, as well as they have an office in Santiago, and it communicates with that as well. So they can coordinate activities between all 3 locations. They can control all the antenna from this location. There's 66 antennas. We'll talk about those in a minute. They can also control, see the weather and all that. So they were just kind of getting up. They had a cyber attack against them in September, a ransomware type of thing. It had shut the whole place down for a couple of months, and they were just really getting going again. We were lucky to be able to see this, actually. So here are the antennas that are at the ALMA site. There are 3 different kinds of antenna manufacturers. They make them from North America, East Asia, and Europe. And there's 2 different types, well, actually 4 different antenna types, but the antennas electrically, or if you would, are identical, but the the structures are a little different. The two in the middle, one's a 12 meter. They're all 12 meter, except for the two in the middle. One's 12 meter, one's 7 meter. And I'll explain the 7 meter in a minute. They each weigh about 100 tons each. And the dish is polished to better than 12 microns. So a human hair is about 100 microns across. So that tells you just how well polished they are. It's a 12 meter antenna. There's our group. And I am where? Second from the right. They're able to move these antennas around, and I'll show you the machine that they use that for. So they can configure these antennas in different ways. The dish works like a Cassegrain, so the radiation reflects off the dish to that supported structure in the middle there, and then is reflected back through the hole to the radio detector behind the dish there. We went to the electronics lab there on the left. On the bench is one of the detectors. The blue container there has 10 detectors in it, so it detects 10 frequencies simultaneously from the dish. Okay, it is cooled to minus 452.5 degrees Fahrenheit with liquid helium. So that's 4 Kelvin for all you astro geeks out there. Okay, and so the blue portion is what's cooled to make the detectors very, very sensitive to that frequencies, and then the signal is then routed through a thermal barrier to the bottom part there, where it's routed out to the pad where they have connections in the pad. Almost is the best radio telescope in the world. Of course, it's actually a number of telescopes, but it can measure the cold stellar dust over many frequencies, as I mentioned, and then also the nature of the dust particles themselves. That picture to the far right is HL Tau, and that's what you're seeing there are the protoplanetary system there. It's forming around the sun. It's really amazing that you get that kind of resolution. This is one of the machines, it's called a transporter, that moves these antennas around. I think it has 28 tires on it. The suspension system is a combination of hydraulics and pneumatics, and they have millimeter control on lifting with that machine. It literally drives around the antenna and then lifts up the antenna on the pads that are on the side there, and it'll lift it up using the wheels, and then once it gets it off the ground, it'll use the inclined plane to slide it up a little bit higher on there. Now, since you've got liquid helium cooling all those electronics, you really don't want to shut that down, because then you got to cool it all back down again. So they have a generator right on the transporter, so that they literally switch the connection from the pad to the generator so that they keep the helium going. So this antenna is alive as they're moving it. This is the cab, kind of hangs underneath the front there. And then in the right picture, if you see behind the seat, that little orange thing, that's a control box. So they can take that out and they can just, remotely control the whole thing from the outside with that control box too. 3 times. No, that's a lie. No, did not live in the drive. But I did get a picture of one that's transporting. So they bring the antenna down from the high site to the facility to do any kind of maintenance on it, and then they take it back up. And they were taking an antenna back up, and so there you go. So this is about 2 times. Okay. The transporter goes at about 5 kilometers per hour, so it takes a while to get up there. But when you're transporting 100 tons of high sophisticated equipment, you want to kind of take it easy. The transporter itself weighs 150 tons. So, nope, they're all gravel. Well, we probably could. Yeah, that's the chase truck. We get past the pole, and I think it stops definitely soon. So my group got to go up to the high site before you go, you got to take a little test. You got to get your blood oxygen, your pulse, and and pulmonary measured, and your high blood pressure. Pulse and your high blood pressure, I guess. I had high blood pressure. All right. So there was 3 of us who couldn't go because our blood pressure was too high. So I didn't get to go to the high site, but they did take a truck up there and they passed this thing on the way up. So lucky them. So the high site's about 28 kilometers from the operations support facility. It's located on the Channator Plateau at 5,000 meters. That's 16,500 feet. Okay. So why is put it up such a high site? You know, what's the advantage of that? Well, you're getting above a lot of the atmosphere. And of course, the atmosphere absorbs radio waves. So particularly moisture in the atmosphere, but just the atmosphere in general. So just to give you an idea of the kind of better reception they get up there, this is a comparison between a site, Plateau de Boer, at 2,550 meters, or roughly half the height. And that's the transmission through the atmosphere at 5,000 meters. So they're able to detect a lot more at the 5,000 meters Channator site. That's kind of aerial view of it, the way it's laid out. You'll see about center, there's a little cluster. That little cluster is called the compact array. That has all of those 7 meter diameter dishes in it, as well as 4 of the 12-meter dishes. That gives them kind of a deep look into space, with the rest of the antennas spread out over about a 16-kilometer diameter. That gives them the kind of resolution that they want to have as well. Yes, there are 40 volcanoes in Chile. It's in the Ring of Fire. We didn't see any active ones, but there were 4 that were active while we were there. In fact, the first night I came in, right, I was exhausted. You know, I'd flown the red eye, didn't sleep very well. We did a little sightseeing in Santiago, so I crashed that first night. I had a 5.5 magnitude earthquake that I never felt. So, oh well. I know that's dormant right now. So, so here's the movable feast, right? So I told you they could reconfigure these antennas, but if they got to 16 kilometers, so it's like having a 16-kilometer diameter radio telescope. And the way they do that is through radio interferometry. The surface field of time. So radio interferometry, how that works is that you have antennas looking at the same object, capturing the information, and then they route all the electrical signals to a what they call a correlator, and that the correlator synthesizes and brings those signals together and synchronizes them, and then it all looks like it's actually being taken by a reflector that is the distance from A to B there. So by correlating and getting all those together, and they have a nice supercomputer to do that, I'll show you that in a minute, it looks like a 16-kilometer radio telescope. There's my group up there without me. They're all, those backpacks have oxygen tanks in them. So they have oxygen tanks with the little tubes that go to their noses so they can walk around. They spend about 2 hours up there walking around, looking at the antennas and also looking at the array support site. There's the compact array there. See that? And then this is the data center where the antenna signals are combined and the image data is sent to the user, called the Correlator and Signal Transmission Center. It's one of the fastest supercomputing centers in the world. And it's going to receive an upgrade. And they've got a 2-stage upgrade that's just been approved. Going to increase its data production by 200% initially and ultimately by 400%. It'll add more than 1,000 hours of observing time each year. So this is what ALMA does for you. This is this famous Event Horizon Telescope image on the left of M87's black hole, right? Remember seeing that and all, and they had telescopes from around the world. If they didn't have ALMA, it would have looked like the one on the right. So ALMA really adds a lot to it. They've made a number of amazing discoveries with this telescope. After ALMA, We stayed the night there. It was very windy that night, by the way, really lousy to go observing. So we didn't do that. And then the next day we drove back. Now, when we drove to Alma, it was at night. When we landed, we had dinner, and it was dark when we went out. So on the way back, we got to see some things we didn't see on the way out. On the left there is what's called a vicuña. Vicuña is like a small llama, and they're all over the place. There are wild burros out there too, by the way. You can see wild burros wandering around. And then they also had on the right there these roadside shrines, and there are dozens of them between Alma and Calama where we went to, and they're called Anamitas, and there are tens of thousands of these along the rural roads, and they mark where people have died. It's kind of like the white crosses that we have here, where people have died, and they have these shrines, and some are kind of simple, some are quite elaborate. This one's not too bad. It's fairly elaborate, and they maintain those. Yeah, didn't seem that dangerous, but traveling too fast or at night or something, I don't know. Apparently they have crashes. There are quite a few at intersections. So, the hotel director. So we're back in Santiago. I should tell you that when we left Alma, we spent a day in San Pedro de Atacama. There we went to 2 nature preserves, one each night. And we also went in town and just did some shopping and kind of toured it. It was just a little small town, very nice. I'll have pictures of it in a minute. And then the next days when we went back to Calama and flew back to Santiago. And here we're back in Santiago. Hotel directors where we stayed both times. Let's see now. Okay. And then the next day, we went and visited the Santiago offices of Alma and the European Southern Observatory, which has a large presence there. European Southern Observatory, besides Alma, they also have sites at La Silla, Cerro Paranal, and Cerro Amazonas, which is where the extremely large telescope is going to go. This is a model of it. It's a 39-meter telescope with 798 separate segments. And has a 5-mirror design. I'm not real sure exactly how those 5 mirrors work, but it's supposed to have first light in 2027. So that's pretty impressive. He talked about how they're going to be constantly recoding because they take a segment out to recode it, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. I mean, it's just continuous, because there's 798 segments, so they're working on it all the time. So, that evening, that was the last day there. So in the evening, I flew out, returned home. It was an 11-day trip of a lifetime for me. I met 10 new friends, and I left Santiago at 88-degree temperature and landed in Minneapolis in -2. Kind of long to go back down there. How are we doing on time? We got lots of time. Okay. So let me talk to you a little bit about, well, first of all, any questions so far? Yeah.
Thank you for an outstanding presentation. If somebody wanted to go by themselves, would they have the opportunity to visit these locations and these facilities along the way?
So right now, the only facility that is having public visiting is CTIO. You have to arrange it ahead of time, and it has to be you have to be part of a group, not necessarily forming it yourself, but they have to have at least 4 to 15 people. You come up during the day, they show you those 2 at the summit, the Victor Blanco and the SMARTS telescope. You have to provide your own transportation to get up there. You have to bring your own food. You have to bring your own drinks. And you have to visit those 2 telescopes. And they do give a little presentation in the visitor center that they have up there, the little visitor center, and you go back down. That's the extent of what they have right now.
Was any of your trip funded by anybody, or how much did it cost?
It was all funded by me. The flight was $2,000 round trip. The entire thing that we did was about $4,500. So, but it included everything, right? It was all inclusive. And plus the telescopes. It was kind of cool. So it was well worth it. I encourage you, if you want to try out for this, you go to the ACEAP site, the ACEAP site. Usually in the fall is when they start to open this up, and they have an application that you can fill out. And doesn't hurt to try if you want to, try and get into this. There are some people there who were part of institutions like a planetarium or something like that. I think they either partially or fully paid for it as part of their continuing education. If you're connected to a university, you may have had that opportunity, but I think most of us paid our own way. So. Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. Miscellaneous line in the budget.
Hey, David?
I'm sorry, something online? Yeah, go ahead.
Yep. Mark, here, I got a pair of, excuse me, a pair of them. While you're up there, could you see some of the other observatories? I was doing a little Google satellite looking around, and there's a number of observatories fairly close, and I was wondering if you could see some of them.
Yeah, we
And
could
second,
see.
so the Ring of Fire part, how many earthquakes did you get around when you were at that?
I didn't feel any earthquake. The only earthquake that I was aware of was the one that first night, the 5.5 magnitude earthquake. But everything's built there to withstand earthquakes. So I don't know to what magnitude, but we did. Let's see. I don't recall seeing any other observatories, but from Alma, from the high site, which I wasn't able to go to, there was at least one other observatory that was owned by Korea, I believe, that was off to the edge of the Alma site, a optical observatory. But you're right, there's a lot of observatories down there. So, but it's mountainous area too. So, any other questions? Okay, so as ambassadors, we not only wanted to see the observatories, but we also wanted to experience the culture and the hospitality of the Chilean people. So I want to show you a little bit about what we did there. So the first day we got there, we did a little sightseeing in Santiago, and a group of us decided we'll walk the 2 kilometers from the hotel over to the tallest building in South America. Okay, and it's called the Sky Costanera. And you go to the top, and it has a 360-degree observation deck, and you got some spectacular views of Santiago and the surrounding hills. And I have one shot here, but really, it was beautiful to see this whole panoramic view around Santiago. And then we walked the 2 kilometers back and collapsed. So no, really, it was fun. We stopped along the way at a restaurant and had some pizza and stuff. It was good. When we went to La Serena, we flew there in the morning. In the afternoon, we did a little sightseeing in La Serena, had dinner at one of the great restaurants right along the coast there. And then in the evening, we took a trip to Turista Observatoria Alpha Aldea. This shot I like because if you look at the distance, that's Cerro Patron, the 3 telescopes of Cerro Patron on the ridge back there. So you can see from this vantage point. And when we went there, they treated us to a evening. They had kind of a geodesic dome, large tent geodesic dome type thing where they do their outreach, and they had room for I'd say about 30 people in there. And so we sat down there, and they told us about the outreach they're doing. They're associated with the observatories, and they do the outreach in the area for tourism. People come there, as well as local school children and the like. The place itself was basically a bed and breakfast and a vineyard, an active vineyard there as well. And then in the evening, as you can see on the right there, they had a nice spread for us of heavy hors d'oeuvres, some wine, and they had a telescope set up. And so we kind of socialized and looked through the telescope. And on the left there, that's Orion, but of course it's upside down. So that's what I'm telling you. That's kind of disorienting when you're down there. Okay, but yeah, so that was very, very nice, and it was great food and great socializing there too. After Alma, we stopped and spent a day in San Pedro de Atacama. This is basically one of the main drags there. It's a small town. But there's a lot of good shopping there. They had a kind of a main courtyard gathering area. We were there on a Sunday, so were all set up with their little kiosks and selling their stuff. We went to a nice French pastry restaurant. I don't know what the deal was. It was really good, so didn't complain about it too much. And then in the afternoon, oh no, I'm sorry. So we went there, and then that first evening we went to the Reserva Elemento Pubiera Nature Preserve. So this, first of all, they had some llamas there, a dozen llamas. So we made friends with the llamas while we were there. And then they toured us around. And what this group does is not unlike Bellwin. What they're trying to do is bring the land back to the way it was, back when the indigenous peoples were there and cultivating the land and bringing all the native species back. On the left, there's a lot of the native trees that were actually there beforehand. When the Spaniards came in, a lot of that got destroyed. On the right, they talked about how they did the farming back then. So this is a very arid area, right? We're talking about very little rain. And so water management was huge. And they talked about how they had these little canals with doors and things so they could route the water to various places. And they would actually flood this area. And then after they planted it and then it grew up, they had corn back there and some other things that were growing. And this is the way that the indigenous peoples way back when used to grow their food and all. So they were kind of reacclimating the indigenous peoples to their culture because they had lost it. Okay. And then in the evening, we on the left are some handmade instruments. This father and son group pair, he had made these instruments, and they played some of the cultural songs. Very, very big about uniting the sky, the stars, the earth, the peoples. Everybody's kind of, all connected in some way. And so they had some songs about that. And we had a nice fire pit. Again, they had a nice spread of heavy hors d'oeuvres and Chilean wine. And then this fire pit where we sat around and listened to them and their songs. And it was very nice. Then the next day in the afternoon, we drove out into the desert to a salt flat. The reason it's so white there, because that's all salt. This is the Salar de Atacama. In the middle of the Salar de Atacama was a shallow lake called the Chaxa Lagoon. And living in the Chaxa Lagoon were flamingos, which I thought was absolutely amazing. I thought flamingos were tropical birds, but here they are out in the middle of the desert, just thriving here because the water was shallow and it's warm. And with the salt and all that, there's a lot of nutrients. So microorganisms and small crustaceans grew rather rapidly there and provided a source of food for the flamingos, and the flamingos thrived. And there's actually 3 different varieties of flamingos there. There's the James flamingo, must have been named by James, and then the Andean flamingo and the Chilean flamingo. And they definitely had a little bit different markings on it. Well, that was really fascinating to see these birds out in the middle of nowhere. So they have a little bit of pink on them, but not much. Flamingos get their pink color by eating like shrimp but that's tropical stuff. They don't have that here. So there's a little bit of pink on them. Mostly they're white and gray. About 30 degrees south. This actually may have been a little bit farther north. It may have been about 25 degrees south. So, and that's it. So, blank. That's it.
I didn't know your end slide.
Yeah, well,
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Dave. I appreciate that. I've watched it twice now and I've still learned new things every single time. It's lovely.
Thank you.
So I'm sorry.
I'm going to Indiana to give the same presentation. Yeah, I've got a couple of places lined up to go give a presentation, Rochester and then Indiana. And I'm also going to take a variation of this. My sister is a Benedictine nun in a monastery. I'm going to kind of swizzle this a little bit and get a little bit away from the technical and more into the cultural side for them, because I think they'd find that very interesting. So it's just kind of the way the group is. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
Well, I believe that concludes our night unless anybody else has any questions or any more questions. So thank you again, Dave.
My brother.
Oh, wait, Mark has one. Oh, yes. If you're in-house, there's some free items of telescopic equipment that Mark brought in, along with name badges in the back, that if you have them and you're here, please bring your name badge home. Chris would really appreciate it being a little bit lighter as he traverses back and forth. So I guess next month is April 6th, back here at the Anbetu Teka Educational Center. I've been practicing. Hopefully I said that right. Otherwise, everybody have a great night. And if you're going over to Old Chicago, I will see you there. Thank you.